Morning, guys. So we're now going into our fourth or fifth week of lockdown. I hope we're all managing somehow to stay sane. This morning we're going to be having a little look at Exodus, specifically chapters 1 through to 4. And this focuses on the birth and the calling of Moses. I don't know how many of you know much about Exodus or have given it a good read. But it's basically a story of how the Israelites managed to flee Egypt and came to know liberation as God's chosen people. Exodus, the word, it literally means a mass departure of people. But since biblical times, we've now come to know Exodus as something that's associated more with freedom, faithfulness, and, associated with a God who's become pretty good at keeping his promises. So if we just dive straight in. So Exodus chapter 1. So the Israelites, they are maintaining pretty good obedience to God. So they are being fruitful, they're having big families, they're having children. And this links in with Genesis 1:28, where God says, be fruitful and multiply. So the Israelites are doing this. But the Pharaoh, he's getting quite concerned. He's worried that the Israelites, because they're growing in numbers so rapidly, he's worried that they're going to be able to overpower him. They're concerned, the Pharaoh's concerned that the Israelites, specifically the young Hebrew baby boys, are going to grow up and they're going to be powerful. They're going to have the ability to turn against the Egyptians, to fight on, with the enemy. So the Pharaoh is pretty concerned. Because of this, and because of the fears that he's going to be overthrown, the Pharaoh orders for the slaughter of all innocent baby boys, all the young Hebrew boys. He says even in Exodus 1, verse 22, he says to the people of Egypt, if you come across a Hebrew baby boy, I want you to throw him into the Nile. So, the Pharaoh isn't really messing around. He's taking this very seriously. And he's doing some pretty irrational things. And then we go on to chapter 2. So in chapter 2, Moses' parents remained obedient to God. So even though there was all of this going on around them, Hebrew baby boys are being slaughtered, they're being killed. But Moses' parents, they trusted in God and they remained obedient and they conceived Moses. So when times got tough, they didn't let their fear distract them from their faithfulness. And this decision that led to them birthing Moses, led to the freedom of the Israelites. Hundreds of people became free because of their obedience to God. But we need to think about all the things that could have gone so wrong. All the risks that Moses' mother took when she put him in the basket and into the river. The basket could have overturned. The Pharaoh or the Pharaoh's followers could have found the basket and the child Moses could have been killed. Think of the wildlife in the waters. Moses could have been swallowed up. All of these things could have happened. The basket could have never been found. But this didn't happen. Moses was found, and he was found by the Pharaoh's daughter. He was found almost by the right people, the people that were going to be able to take him in. And the Pharaoh's daughter showed Moses compassion. See, this beginning bit, it shows how when we are obedient to God, he keeps his promises to us and we are safe and we're protected. And that's just a little bit of background on the opening, the birth of Moses and the situation that was pretty dire from the second Moses was born, this conflict that was going on in Egypt. Now, Exodus chapter 3, fast forwards to about 40 years when Moses is middle-aged, and Moses is tending to his flock. He's taking the animals up onto the mountain when this bush out of nowhere starts burning. Okay, an angel of the Lord appears, and Moses is kind of thinking, what is going on? This is mental. This bush is burning, but it's not burning up. It's not falling apart. Like this is unusual. And Moses is doing an ordinary, everyday thing. He's not doing anything extraordinary. And it's very important to note that Moses doesn't encounter God, when he's only when he's praying or when he's trying or seeking God. God meets with Moses when he's in his everyday life, when he's doing the most menial of things. So this does show us that we don't always have to only meet God in moments where we're, feeling super spiritual. I know Hannah said this in an earlier talk. We don't only have the ability to meet with God at church on Sunday mornings or at Soul Survivor or DTI or wherever we may be on Yob Camp. We don't have that restraint in our relationship with God. We can meet with him anywhere, wherever we seek him, whatever we're doing. We can have that relationship and we can talk to God. So, we could be at work, we could be at school, we could be with our friends, our families, we could be doing the chores that I'm sure your parents have set you around the house. There is no time or place in the world that God isn't able to meet with us when we seek him. So anyway, back to the burning bush. So God calls out to Moses. He's like, Moses, Moses. And amongst all of this confusion, amongst all of this, uncertainty, and Moses is like, what's going on? During all of this, Moses' response is just, here I am. Now, this response should be an example to us. It's about making ourselves available to God. Just telling him that we are here and that we are ready. Moses didn't really know what was going on, but he responded to God by saying, here I am, use me, I'm here. But Moses is only human. So inevitably, the doubt kicks in. So in Exodus 3 verse 11, Moses, once, God says to Moses, right, what's happening with the Israelites in Egypt? It's awful. I need you to go and I need you to speak to the people and speak to the Pharaoh. I need you to tell the Pharaoh to let my people go. So God's asking this of Moses, but Moses is saying, who am I that I should go? What authority do I have that I'm the right person for this? Are you sure? Are you sure you've got the right person? Now, this is often a response that we have in our everyday lives when we feel God calling us to things. It's like, why me? Why should I go? What authority do I have? But we need to remember that God knows exactly who he's sending. The Bible tells us in Psalm 139 that God knit us together in our mother's womb, that he knows our inmost being. And then again in Luke 12 verse 7, it says that even the hairs on our heads are numbered and that God knows every single one. So God knows exactly what he's doing when he calls Moses to ministry. And then the next verse, God says to Moses, I will be with you. I'm going to be there the whole way. So we are not always meant to do these things alone. God is going to be there with us. It's often the why element of it. It's often not for us to handle. God's sorting that out. All we need to know to respond and to follow God is the what and the when. And God's going to be with us the whole way. He doesn't abandon us. He prepares us. And this is because he knows that we are capable. But Moses continues to doubt God. Even one of God's most trusted servants, he's scared and he says, what if they don't believe me? What if they don't listen? But this isn't for us to worry about. It's not for Moses to worry about. We can't feed our fear. We need to feed our faith. And this is often the greatest battle that we face as Christians, the trusting God part. Especially when it comes to evangelism and talking Jesus, because the biggest battle we fight is the one against ourselves. It's this fear of rejection, this fear of like the desperate need to be agreed with. When we tell people about God and we preach about Jesus, there is this part of us which desperately seeks, the agreement of the other person. And we don't always get that. In fact, in my experiences, a lot of the times where I try and preach about God and I try and share the word of God with people, that is the opposite of the response I get. I often don't get the, oh yeah, I totally agree, or oh my gosh, I see that now. Because it's a journey. So the truth is that our fear, this fear that we feel in these situations, this fear that Moses is feeling in this part where he's like, what if they don't believe me? What if they don't listen to me? This fear cannot belong to us if our hearts belong to God. But Moses is still worried. And God reminds Moses once again that he will be there with him. So in verses 4 to 8 of Exodus chapter 4, God gives Moses the ability to prove himself to the Israelites. He says, if they still don't believe you, I will give you the ability to take the water out of the Nile and turn it into blood in front of them. So God's not like, sorry mate, you're on your own. God's like, look, if they still don't believe you, I will help you. I will be there. I will support you through this. But Moses is still having none of it. The fear is still overriding him. And in Exodus 4 verse 13, he's like, please, Lord, send somebody else. Literally, he says, send someone else. And I think as Christians, we all know that feeling. That moment where we're like, please, God, do not choose me for this. Please, God, choose someone else. Send someone else. And I often have these moments more frequently than I feel I sometimes should. And they normally occur selfishly at the most inconvenient times for me. And, an example of this is I remember when I first moved to university and I've told all my flatmates, all the people I was living with, all my friends from my course, I said, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus, I go to church. But I was the first Christian friend that most of them had. And although they might have known about church growing up, maybe some of them have been as children, they didn't really understand and they didn't really know my beliefs, my practices, everything that's all part and parcel of Christianity, they weren't really aware of. So I was walking through town, Yorktown Centre, with a few of my new non-Christian friends, and we walked past this homeless woman. And she was crying, and with every fibre of my being, I knew that I needed to stop. I needed to talk to her. And I hate to say it, but at the same time, there was this little part of me that was like, not now, God. Please, not now. Look at all these people in this town centre, all the people that are here. One of them has to be another Christian, another follower of you. Can you choose someone else? Send someone else to speak to her. And I think part of it was that natural, that fear, that maybe embarrassment, that worry that they were going to think that I was super weird for stopping and talking and praying with a stranger in the streets. So shamefully, I walked past. But the second I passed this woman, there's this voice in my head saying, Isabel, go back, turn around and go back. And I had to. So I did. And I sat with her for probably about half an hour. And, I said to her, what's your experience with Christianity, with God? Do you believe in a God? And she said, if there is a God, then he's abandoned me. So I was like, okay, this is my moment. And I need to speak to her and I need to explain to her about the love of God. So we sat there, as I said, for about half an hour and we just prayed. We prayed for renewal, revival, for rebuilding and restructuring in her life. And she stopped crying. And at the end, she was like, thank you. Like I've had conversations with people who are Christians over the year, and she said, she was only recently homeless. It was all very new to her. And she said, although people had given her Bibles or said, come to our community breakfasts or come to our social groups or whatever, no one had ever actually sat down and prayed for her. And she was saying to me, thank you so much, this really means a lot. And as I, left and I walked on, I thought, can you imagine if I hadn't have stopped, if I haven't have sat down with her? So this is a moment I think about a lot. Because just like Moses and his ministry leading to the freedom of the Israelites, most of the times that we're called by God, it's not our lives that it's supposed to change or impact. It's the lives of somebody else. So when we just walk by or we just ignore it can have a massive impact on the lives of others as well. And I don't know if it's always fear that stops us from evangelizing or following God. I often think it's a whole jumble of things. Maybe we think that we aren't strong enough, we aren't faithful enough or good enough. Maybe, like I did, you think there's a whole world of people out there who could do it way better than you ever could. But I don't think it relies on us. And I don't think it ever really has. I think it relies on Him. God gives us the strength that we need to do it, and He gives us the strength for it every single time. And He doesn't require our ability. He requires our availability. God never chooses the people who are best skilled in situations. He chooses ordinary people for extraordinary things. That's His whole thing. We are all in service to God. He's going to use us all. All He wants is for our response when He calls out our names like He did with Moses. He just wants our response to be, here I am. Whatever it is I'm in, use me or send me. He just wants our availability, our openness to it. And as I said, God has always used ordinary people for extraordinary purposes. So when we think, not me, it can't be me, I'm not good enough, I'm not this, I'm not that. Once again, take yourself back and remember God knows who He's sending, and He knows why He's sending you. So if we look at, for example, the calling of the 12 disciples, we see ordinary men doing ordinary things in their ordinary lives when Jesus comes along and is like, abandon everything and follow me. Now, I know that if I was there on that shore, and this guy comes along and he's like, put your nets down, get up, follow me, I'd be like, who is this? What's going on here? But the disciples didn't. It was no questions asked. They were like, yeah, okay. And instead of fearing and running, they just followed. And this is because in total surrender, there is total freedom. And God doesn't force us to do anything that we're not okay with, that we're not ready for. So when Moses still really wasn't sure, God sent Aaron, Moses' brother, to accompany him. God supports us every time. So even if that means us taking somebody else with us, or using a little bit extra support, or not being able to do it completely on our own, God still remains faithful to us. So later on in Exodus 4:30-31, Moses and Aaron showed the Israelites what God had told them, and they believed. So when God commands things of us, when we do what God commands of us, wonder becomes witness. They had done what God had asked of them, despite how worried they were. And in response, the Israelites believed them. Moses obeyed, God provided, and the people believed. Now this is evangelism. This is talking Jesus at its very core. We obey, He provides, they believe. So, the punchline to all of this is that Exodus 1-4, the birth and the calling of Moses, it's a story of faithfulness. It's a story of people trusting in God even when they're at their most vulnerable, even when they have potentially the most to lose. It's a story of God providing of people believing in God, following God, some for the very first time. So the takeaway from this is that no matter what God asks of us, however much we believe that we cannot do it, that it will be done better if God just chose someone else, that God knows what he's doing, and that there is a reason why he chose you. So the next time you feel God pushing you, it might be with your friends at school, it might be at the bus stop, it might be through random acts of kindness, total ordinary things in totally ordinary situations. No matter what or where it is, be open, be willing, but most of all, be ready. Because when we follow God and when we're obedient to God, amazing things happen. And when we follow his lead, lives can be changed forever. If Moses' parents had have thought at the very beginning, oh my goodness, the baby boys are being killed, the Pharaoh's won, that's it, we surrender, we will stop being fruitful, we will stop having children, Moses would have never been born. And although he was born into the most dire circumstances, he was born exactly at the right time. So we are always called to just go. We are always called to go and to evangelize and to tell people about this amazing God that we have, even when we are in the most dire circumstances. And we have only failed to do that when we have believed that we've arrived. Because this is the beautiful thing about evangelism. We don't arrive. We keep on going and we keep on telling people about God and we keep being obedient. And as we keep doing this, brilliant, amazing things still continue to happen. People come to know God and it's brilliant. So I hope that the first few chapters of Exodus you have a bit of a greater insight into now. And that I really hope that over the next week, few weeks, that you can just really be thinking about if there's ever that little, nagging in your head, that little feeling of, I should do this, or I should talk to this person, or I should, call my grandparents, or I should do anything. If there is anything, especially in this bizarre lockdown period of time, if there is this feeling in you that's saying, I need to do this, just do it. Just follow God, follow his lead, and brilliant things will happen. So just before I go, next week, we're going to be having a little look at the next section in Exodus. We're going to be having a little look at Exodus chapters 5 to 11. So that's like the plagues, the beginning of the Exodus, the beginning of the leaving Egypt. So yeah, if you want to have a little look, have a little read in the Bible, get a little bit of background on it, please feel free to do so. But above everything, I just hope you guys are keeping sane, keep finding new cool things to do. Maybe it's baking, maybe it's art and painting, and maybe it's just getting outside and playing in the garden. Try and keep yourselves motivated, and it'll all be over soon. But have an amazing week, guys. Bye.